a lot about bluegrass banjo playing. I hear a lot about bluegrass music these days. Somewhere between 1948 and 1950, along in there, one of the announcers got up on the Grand Ole Opry and said, "Here's Bill Monroe to play some of that good old bluegrass music from up in Kentucky." And it sort of stuck. And Bill Monroe weren't the most pleasant character you ever ran into in your life on a good day. And it showed a lot around his contemporaries. He was not a favorite child, and I could go into an hour's worth of stories. Matter of fact, when I do my history of bluegrass presentation, I had some folks in Australia one time sit still for 5 hours one Saturday while I went from one end of it to the other about what the music was and the phenomena of the music. There's a reason that old man's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Country Music Hall of Fame and all the rest of the stuff. And I personally think somewhere about 200 or 300 years from now, when the dust settles on 20th century American music, there'll be two names pop out of the hat, and that'll be Louis Armstrong and Bill Monroe. Because just about everything in the second half of the 20th century can musically be traced to those guys that came out of here. Monroe's music went through a funny thing. It was a primal form of music that happened along. It played at funny places on the beat. It had a different chop to it. It was much more like jazz than it was country music of the day. In my presentation, I talked about Monroe's presence in Chicago, where I believe a lot of that came from. When he went up there when he was 18 years old and left the Rosine area. But at a primal form, it lasted up till about 1958. And by then, the music was pretty much down the tubes, and Monroe was too. Rock and roll. What rock and roll didn't kill, the sound of electric music did sort of knock out there for a while. He got reborn when a banjo player came in, and the music got reborn as an elevated art form in the early 60s. It became something different, and the old man found out he could achieve that musical high horse again with all his snobbery, because he was snobbish about his music in that country music realm, by the intricacies of the fiddle tunes. And when Bill Keith came along playing the banjo, they found that out. The bluegrass music in them days, last thing I want to talk, fellas, and I won't run it long. It's a funny thing to me. I want to take the side of Roy Acuff, the king of country music. One of the first ones in the Hall of Fame down there, patriarch of the Grand Ole Opry for 40-some years. Got so big in the early 40s, he left the Grand Ole Opry to go out. Made 7 movies, headlined on Broadway with Ronald Reagan as the front act. Through part of all that stuff. The king of country music, if he were to walk on stage today with his fiddle and his guitar and his bass and his banjo and his dobro in the band, he would be introduced as a bluegrass band. And I think that's a travesty. I think it's an insult to both men's careers, myself. But I'm an old man, and that's the way time blurs lines. And the acoustic string band music that's out there, contemporary acoustic string band that's called bluegrass today, y'all get some of them old Bear family box sets and listen to that old man.